thanks all for being here. And again, this case example, is about the eBird mini grants, and it involves a local land trust, the Kent Land Trust, where I'm the executive director, and the Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, which is an RCP, where I am the coordinator. So the Kent Land Trust is a single town land trust in Kent, Connecticut, which is in Northwest Connecticut. It's a really beautiful place of forested hills, rural fields. The Appalachian Trail runs through it, and yes, a river also runs through it. That's the Housatonic River. The Kent Land Trust's signature property is this picture with the heart here, a 12-acre organic vegetable farm on Route 7, bounded by the Housatonic River. There's also a freshwater lagoon. You can glimpse that in the picture below, right? It's a great place to see waterfowl, raptors, and other birds that make use of open habitat, cavity trees, and the proximity of this property to water. The Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative is a regional conservation partnership of about 33 different conservation organizations in Northwest Connecticut. The partners are many small, all volunteer land trusts, single community, most of them all manage public preserves and protected land. There are a few staffed organizations and many which run educational programs. The Greenprint Collaborative meets regularly to discuss hot topics, shared experiences, successes, and resources. As I mentioned in kind of the lightning descriptions, we leveraged 2 eBird training grants and a land trust small grant. And I'm giving a shout out on this slide on the bottom to our amazing board member, Lori Doss, who chairs the science department at the Marvelwood School, which is a local private high school in the town of Kent. All right, so as I mentioned, for the Kent Land Trust, that farm is our signature property. And so in applying for a eBird mini grant, the training grant, what we really hoped to get out of that was engagement of constituents, more knowledge about what was going on this signature property, and more data about what birds were present on the property. What we did was kind of 2 phases. We had a Zoom where we invited members of our stewardship committee and other volunteers to attend and learn about how to use eBird. That Zoom, which was instructional, was followed by an in-person field day for our stewardship committee. We paired it with a work day on the property. It was an Earth Day event, actually. So members of the Kent Land Trust Board and volunteers from the community convened to help to replant the buffer around that freshwater lagoon, which again, you can kind of see in this below left photo. What we asked of participants in the training was that in exchange for learning about this, for our training, that they come back and gather eBird data at least 3 times over the course of the season. So we were, then at least extracting like an oral promise to, to help us flesh out what we knew. And we created hotspots at 6 or 7 Kent Land Trust preserves. We also used social media to, to publicize the fact that we wanted people to be using eBird at our preserves. And for any of you who use eBird, you probably know that eBird itself is kind of a social media of kinds, because people look at it when they're trying to suss out where they want to go. The Kent Land Trust paired that eBird training grant with a land trust small grant, which offers up to $5,000 to do things like habitat restoration. We did habitat restoration at this site. We ran some school trips. That's what you're seeing up top on the left. And in the school trips, we not only taught the kids, even these kids that are in 2nd grade, how to use eBird, but we engaged them in doing some habitat restoration at that buffer. We also employed summer interns who both gathered data and participated in the green print training. That's the next slide. One more thing I wanted to mention, down on the left, it's not a great picture, but it is a picture showing an example from this thing called Chronolog, which allows you to install like a frame where you set your cell phone in it and you take pictures. So you end up with kind of like a series of pictures of the same thing over time lapse. And so we set that up to monitor how our restoration went. And that's still going. Hard for me to see my arrows, but there. Okay. So for the Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, we did our eBird training at the end of June. We had an in-person outside meeting. There were maybe about 25 people from, say, like 10 different land trusts there, members of the collaborative. Prior to the meeting, we sent an email that had hot links on it so that people could set up their account and be ready to eBird when they got there that day. We sent out an agenda that had links to videos, training videos, and other resources from eBird. We also had a slide deck that was ready. We printed it out for our in-person session, but also sent it after the fact too. And the idea was that land trusts receiving this training would be able to use both the agenda and that slide deck to do their own training when they brought this back to their own land trusts, their own organizations. We did a presentation first, kind of similar to what we did at the Kent Land Trust on Zoom, and then we did some field practice, and then we did some question and answer. And the reason that I'm not showing you photos of that is we were having so much fun just using our phones for eBird and Merlin that we forgot to take any pictures. So we were all just using our phones for eBird and not for other things that day. So how are we carrying on this work? This spring at the Kent Land Trust, we are again going to run that training, both like a Zoom and a field work. We're calling it like an early bird training. We're going to blow it out so that it is open to a bigger audience this time, having been successful last time. We're going to have a contest where we engage people in collecting data over using eBird and competing for different prizes. We're also in connection with that doing these bird packs, which are backpacks that are packed with things that you might need to go birding. So they'll have binoculars, but also field guides of birds that they're likely to see in the area, instructions on how to eBird, etc. And we're going to launch that during the spring break for local schools. So suggested as an activity that parents can do with their kids over the break. The resources that will be in the backpacks will also be usable in other formats. So we're going to post the instructions to eBird and Merlin in all of our kiosks. We'll have them on our website. We'll be able to use the field guides, again on our website, but also publish them using social media such as Facebook. Students are creating YouTube videos showing how to do these various things, just so we have that modality as well and can put it on our YouTube channel. And then we're going to continue the work that we began with the small grant to make further improvements and to also to assess the success of the live stakes and the perennial natives that we planted along the buffer last year. So top 5 takeaways just really quickly, and then we'll stop for questions. Number 5, eBird can really inform your strategic conservation planning, and this is from the RCP perspective. We use a corridor initiative called Follow the Forest, which is a connectivity initiative focused on core forests and the properties that link them in like a south to north corridor stretching all the way from New Jersey to Canada. I invite you to check it out at followtheforest.org. That's at the bottom of the slide that explains the model and has an interactive map and a story map and a short film. So everything that you might need to learn more. But as we know, birds don't stop at town boundaries. They also aren't really foiled by barriers like roads, but they do depend on habitat connectivity and how ecosystems are juxtaposed and relate to each other. So data and focus on bird habitats, where birds are moving, what they're using for, what properties they're using for food and water and breeding and et cetera, are really important to inform this model, Follow the Forest, for identifying priorities for land protection and for stewardship interventions. So we've also crosswalked our model with the new interactive mapping tool that we're going to hear about when we finish with these case examples. Number 4 takeaway: using eBird encourages collaboration. The Kent Land Trust property that I showcased is actually part of a landscape important bird area called the Macedonia Block Important Bird Area. And there are 4 different partners within the Greenprint that own properties within this area. And there's a bird habitat management plan that encompasses the full area. So knowing more about what's going on our land enables us to participate in a partnership for managing the entirety. Takeaway number 3, eBird can inform your habitat management. So, as I indicated, we paired our eBird training grant with that Land Trust small grant to conduct the restoration around the freshwater lagoon. With the eBird, we can see in real time what birds people are seeing now that we've done that. The observations don't really depend on us. We have a very small staff. So it really increases our bandwidth to have other people out on the property collecting data. And that can also be used for outreach about best land management practices. So we can pair this with education about what we're doing for this restoration and help people to know what they should be doing with their own private lands. Takeaway number 2, knowing what you have is a really important baseline, right? So data from eBird drives money to programs that are focused on certain habitats and certain birds. But then the data also provides us with a way to measure our outcomes when we get grant funding and to be able to report back the success of our interventions. And then finally, eBird's a great way to engage your volunteers, your members, and other stakeholders. And that bottom picture is that board member Lori Doss with our interns finding a Virginia rail for the first time on one of our preserves. So that's my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all and take any questions that you might have.
Did you run the eBird trainings? I'm sorry, you might have said that.
We did, yeah. So the Kent Land Trust did it here first,
yeah,
within our land trust, and then did it for the benefit of the Greenprint Collaborative.
Right. And what were your second graders doing for restoration? Was that plantings?
Yeah, they were doing some planting. So we had some perennial native plants that they were able to put in the ground. And that was not Earth Day. So like the live stakes went in at Earth Day, and that was a very cold day, but the second graders got to plant in June.
And did the plants survive?
I don't know. So, so we have in that chronologue picture, there, I don't know if you could see, but there are all these flags. So there are all these
I did
flags
see that,
out there in our buffer area, and it's winter, and and it got
next
messy,
year,
but we'll see. We'll see what comes up.
Great.
Yeah.
It's really impressive, Connie. I'm just curious how you were able to reach people. Was it through other partners, or do you have a pretty broad reach in your geographic area, large population base to work with?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because the one that was run at the Kent Land Trust was pretty small, because it was our stewardship committee and some select volunteers. So it was like people that we kind of handpicked that we knew were already in our circle. And that's why we're going to run it again this year, now that we kind of feel like we have it under our belt and we know what works. I think the question is almost like more important for the purpose of the RCP, because we kind of gave it out to the RCP and then said, go do this in your own organizations. And I'm not really sure how many did. So I think that's another area where specific follow-up is necessary to be able to say, did anyone do this? How'd that work out? Are you going to do it again? What are you finding? So it's really not a one and done.
Great.
but it's so easy, I guess. I mean, like, I hope that, I hope my presentation wasn't too simplistic. There's not that much to say about it. It's kind of like it runs itself. It's really fun. It's a great engagement tool. There's no reason not to do it.
Do you have staff who are involved with leading that? Is it volunteer led?
We do. We have, so it's a single town. We have 4 part-time staff. And so we have both staff and board members, actually. So that board member, Lori Doss, was instrumental. She kind of runs the show and anything bird related. But I was involved. The program manager at the Kent Land Trust was involved and can follow up with that as well. And our land manager really planned and led the restoration effort. So all of those staff were involved, but I don't see it as something, I see it as something that volunteers on a land trust board for an all volunteer land trust could probably handle, particularly because I find that a lot of land trust board members already know how to use eBird. So they're engaged in that way.
Great.
Yeah, this is really great, Connie. Roxanne Bogart. I'm curious about the Follow the Forest initiative and who runs that and more about that as well.
Yeah, good. So I mean, there are connectivity initiatives all over the place now, like nationwide, and which is a great thing. And they're usually geographically centered, right? So Follow the Forest is that kind of boreal forest corridor that is from maybe the bottom of New Jersey all the way up through Canada. And so it's a multi-state effort that includes, places in New Jersey, New York for sure, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and going up to Canada. It is modeled on core forest habitat and the connections between those and where those connections are secure because of protected lands and where they are threatened because of under protection, either within those core forest areas or with linkages. It's an effort that right now is driving land protection decisions, but could also be utilized very well as a stewardship and habitat restoration model, as well as a model that outreaches really well to the public because it's pretty easily understood and observed. It is highly local and at the same time so macro because it's a very good way of illustrating to people that what you do in your very particular section of the world could break a chain that impacts multiple states. And so it centers you around your job and your importance in the scheme of the whole.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, we're banging up right at the edge. 30 seconds left. Any final questions? I appreciate your attention.
I'm just going to say this is a marvelous project, and I'm happy to hear your success.
Good, Jean, let me know. I'd be happy to share with you those slide decks, the agenda, all of that. We all crib from each other. So what we have came from eBird, and we'd love to have you use it too. So just reach out.
Yeah, I'm interested too, because I work in and around urban areas with community engagement. So
great. All right. Well, I'll see you back in the main, and I hope your next session is really terrific. As I said in my kind of lightning round, I'm going to tell you about how we used 2 eBird mini grants with a local land trust and then an RCP. And this case example involves the Kent Land Trust, where I'm the executive director, and the Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, which is an RCP where I am the coordinator. So the Kent Land Trust is a single town land trust in Kent, Connecticut, which is in Northwest Connecticut. It's a really beautiful place of forested hills and rural fields. The Appalachian Trail runs through it, and yes, a river also runs through it, the Housatonic River. The Kent Land Trust signature property is this one in the middle with a heart. It's a 12-acre organic vegetable farm right on Route 7 and bounded by the Housatonic. There's also a freshwater lagoon on that property. You can glimpse it in the background of this bottom picture here. It's a really great place to see waterfowl, raptors, and other birds that are using the open habitat, cavity trees, and proximity to water here. The Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative is an RCP of about 33-ish organizations in Northwest Connecticut. It is this mint green chunk right here, which is from the RCP Network's map. The partners are many small, all-volunteer land trusts, some staffed organizations, all of which manage public preserves and protected land, many of which run educational programs. The Greenprint meets regularly to discuss hot topics, share experiences, successes, resources, etc. So I'm also giving just a shout out quickly on this slide to my friend Lori Das, who chairs the science department at the Marvelwood School, which is a private high school in the town of Kent. And Lori has been instrumental to our bird programming at the Kent Land Trust. Okay, so what the Kent Land Trust hoped to get out of its eBird mini grant was in a way to do some community engagement, to gain more knowledge and more data about what was happening on our signature preserve, which is that farm property. Here's another picture of it in the middle. What we did for our eBird training was kind of a two-phased. We had a Zoom workshop that we did midweek in the evening. Most people are familiar with Zoom at this point, so that was a good modality to do that part of the training, and that was instructional, followed by an in-person field day for our stewardship committee and some other volunteers. And the field day was on Earth Day of last year. We paired that field day with a work day where we were doing some restoration around the freshwater lagoon, which was the subject of our Land Trust small grant. What we asked of the participants in this training was that they return 3 times and at least 3 times and collect eBird data at one of our preserves, preferably this farm preserve. So there was kind of this promise that if we teach you this, you need to go out and practice it. We made hotspots on 6 or 7 of our preserves. We also used social media to communicate about eBird in our website as well. And by the way, I consider eBird to be a little bit of a social media platform itself, because people certainly use that to go and shop around and try and figure out where it might be interesting for them to go birding. Our Land Trust small grant, as I mentioned, was about restoring this freshwater lagoon. What you don't see in this picture is that it used to be that the borders of the lagoon were choked with invasives, ton of rose, ton of barberry. And so we did some removal of those invasives and restored with native plantings. The small grant paid for that restoration as well as some summer internship time. The summer interns gathered data at the preserve and also conducted the eBird training. So let's go to that slide. So our RCP training was during a meeting in June of last year. It was at our Greenprint partner, the Steep Rock Association's Macrocostas Preserve. It's where their offices are, but also like the KLT farm, it's a place of really diverse habitat. It's great for field observation. So for that training, we sent an email out first with links so people could set up their accounts, their eBird accounts prior to the training. and do a little bit of exploring. We sent out an agenda, again, with hot links to helpful videos and how-tos on the eBird site. We created a slide deck to guide the training and also emailed that out to participants for their future reference, and also with the hope that they would use the materials in training their own constituents. So they were invited to use both the agenda and the slide deck, any of the resources, to go and share with others. We did, like the Kent Land Trust one, a presentation first, although it was live, but some instructional, and then we went out and did some field practice and came back and had some Q&A. And the reason that I don't have any pictures of that is that we were having so much fun using our phones for eBirding and for Merlin that we forgot to take any pictures outside of those applications. So sorry, but it was an enormous success and really just a very fun time. So how are we following up this work? At KLT this spring, we're going to do these trainings again, bring them to a wider audience, a public audience this time. We're going to do an early bird training in the beginning of April. We're going to pair that with an eBird contest with a variety of prizes for different categories. We're creating some bird packs, backpack loaners, that will be available at our local library and have the things that people need in order to do some birding, including binoculars and field guides and instructions on how to use eBird and Merlin. We're going to use the materials from those bird packs in our other places, right? So we're going to post the instructions in our kiosks and on our website, and we share the field guides on our social and things like that. Students are also creating short YouTube videos that we can post on our channel about, some tips for using binoculars, but also how to use eBird and Merlin effectively and so forth. And then we're going to continue making the habitat improvements at the KLT farm that are the subject of that mini grant. So what are some top takeaways? I did 5. I'll try to rush through them since I know we're probably short on time at this point. So the first is that, doing this kind of work can really inform your strategic conservation planning, particularly for an RCP. This slide shows the Litchfield Green Prints Follow the Forest Connectivity Project. It focuses on core forests and the linkages between those. We know that birds, don't respect town boundaries and aren't foiled by barriers like roads, but they really do depend on habitat connectivity and how ecosystems are juxtaposed. And so data that focuses on bird habitats, where they're moving and what areas they're using for food, water, breeding, shelter, are all really important for identifying priorities for land protection locally and regionally, and certainly inform our Follow the Forest initiative. One other thing I should say about this is that this habitat connectivity initiative looked at the Northeast Bird Habitat Conservation Initiative's new interactive map tool, which you'll see after this presentation, and crosswalk those so that we could continue to inform our priorities with the data and research of others. Second takeaway, that it encourages collaboration. So the KLT farm is part of the Macedonia Forest Block Important Bird Area, and there are 4 different partners in the Greenprint Collaborative that own land and manage land in that important bird area. So the bird area is all subject to a bird habitat management plan, and gathering this data and working in this way enables us to better engage with our partners in carrying out that habitat management plan. It informs our habitat management, certainly on this farm. And so here is the picture of, again, the land that we restored. This is in November. I wanted to point this out actually not because it's such a great picture, but it's a picture that was taken for a chronologue device. And you guys might know, if you don't know about that, there's like a a frame, a gadget you can get where you basically put your phone in and you're taking a picture from the exact same place, many times over the course of time. So it almost creates like a time lapse. But we thought that that would be another really great way to supplement the data that we were gathering in order to see how this restoration work is going and how our success. So I find that this work not only informs our own land management, but can be really useful in engaging others in learning about how best to manage their private lands. 2 more takeaways and then I'll stop. Data collection, of course, really important for getting a baseline, but then also for your reporting out because it enables us to see how things change, if they change, and to think about the outcomes of our interventions. And then finally, also pretty obvious, but eBird and this kind of work is a really fun way and terrific way to engage people of all kinds. And the photo on the bottom is Lori Das with our 2 summer interns, the first time that they documented a Virginia rail on one of our properties. Not related to that top picture, by the way, but I just think it's hilarious. And that was a fave that was on our social media feed. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks for your attention and see where your questions might be. None? Okay, who did something similar? It was so easy. That's the other thing, my other message. Oh, and Eileen, I see your hand up. Is that this was not hard to do at all and super fun, if you can't tell by the way that I'm talking to you. So I encourage you, if you were thinking about doing something like this, please do. And if you are interested in seeing the agenda and slide deck, I'd be super happy to share it with you. So Eileen.
Yes, I would be interested in seeing the agenda and slide deck. But also it looks like you created some outreach materials that would save other organizations, mentioning no names, some reinvention time, because we have very similar outreach messages about this. And I just wondered if you are willing and able to let other organizations make use of some of the stuff that you developed in this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Eileen, that really goes to where we might go with this for the RCP, because it reached the Kentland Trust training reached a small number of people. The Greenburn Collaborative one, again, a small number of people, but then with the ask, go out and tell more people. We're going to tell more people at the Kentland Trust this year, but I just feel like I don't know. I don't have a good handle on whether or not the RCP partners actually did anything with the training. And I think that, like any effort, that it deserves some follow-up and discussion on the RCP end to make sure that it really does get out there. Mark.
Yeah, I was just wondering, did you lead the trainings yourself? We did something similar in Vermont, but the RCP that used the money was able to, we have a couple people that are well versed in eBird, and so they were the ones that led the training, and I was wondering who took charge of that component.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a really helpful question, because I did a little bit of the training and our summer interns were able to do some of the training too, but having somebody there who was seasoned, who really knew what they were talking about, I think was very helpful. I mean, eBird you can navigate it as an amateur, but there are aspects of it that I think that people who have more familiarity and more depth with the program, more of a direct connection to the moderators, it can really help to have somebody familiar with that kind of back office part of it, to be able to say like, oh, well, not every, there are some sites that maybe should be private. This was what Sarah was talking about when she was answering, I guess it was John's question earlier today, like just thinking about how certain situations are treated, helping to explain to people if they think they see something that would be very unusual in an area, that it might not just be immediately, added up to the, to the site as, helping to explain to them why certain data needs to be verified, why certain recordings from Merlin might need to be verified, why the information might not be accepted until it is corroborated. Anyone else?
I will just say we've used eBird here in Vermont pretty effectively. It started the ball rolling for our scientific advisory group on birds to actually narrow down the number of meadowlarks that were still in the state. And starting from that place, we were able to then, meadowlark is now listed as threatened because we were able to work with that data. And we're doing the same now with golden winged warblers, just collecting all of those sightings and trying to come up with trends between golden wings and blue wings. And you have to know what you're doing on that side of the game, but the data can oftentimes be very useful in furthering conservation initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. Actually, what I was talking with Sarah about during that snowy break that we had was, thinking about whether this contest that we're running as just a small community land trust, this spring could have kind of the hidden motive or the secret motive of, trying to get some data that is needed. So, like just because we're after a certain, it wouldn't even be me because I'm not the scientist, but like if somebody tells me, oh, we really need to know this, we could create the contest to be more likely to come up with that, to find that out. And nobody from the community even needs to know that. They just think that they're in a contest, right? So Eileen, Robin, if there are things that you think we should make part of our contest, let me know.
Yeah,
it would be great if it was more than just an engagement kind of fun activity, if it really helped.
That's cool. I will give that some thought.
say that oftentimes, nature set, Audubon, whether it be Audubon, Connecticut or Audubon, Connecticut, New York, have areas that they're looking for specific information. So checking with them and seeing, I learned very hard years ago, staring at the ocean for hours and hours, never expecting to see what I was looking for. And then somebody said, no data is still data.
Yeah.
So even if you don't necessarily come up with a particular species they might know, that still contributes to the overall, patchwork of information that's coming in.
Yeah, good point. If we know people were there and they didn't see it, but not, if we don't know they were there and we don't know that they saw it, then that doesn't prove anything. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your attention and listening, and I learned something too. So I'm, my wheels are turning. Let's go back and hear some more, and do reach out if you'd like any of those resources. I'm happy to share.
Thank you so much for this.